into authentic conversations about ourselves and our community, exploring topics that uplift and inspire us, from personal growth to social change. So grab your teacup and get ready to join the conversation.
We are back, part two, Diddy's trial or sentencing. Gonna jump right into it. Let's get into it. Okay. Diddy will learn his fate today. Diddy's up for sentencing. Drop those teacups in the chat when you come in the room. Lift your teacups up to be filled. Diddy's tea is being spilled today on the trial, on the sentencing.
Free game, and the timing of it all makes sense as well, because I'm sure he didn't have time during the trial phase to have talking to inmates on a daily basis, because he was preparing for trial. But post sentence, he's had enough time to create and begin facilitating it to the other individuals in the building, and of course, at the end of the day, help him ultimately, because he's not going to be able to benefit from any type of courses, because he's going to have to serve a day for a day.
Yep.
85%.
For you. This is from Ray Santiago. Can the president pardon him?
Well, yes, he can. At this point, Mr. Combs has been convicted, and so now, if the judge wants, or excuse me,
You think he's going to do it?
nah. I think there was conversation about it, and then Trump said something to the effect that maybe Diddy was on the opposite side of the political spectrum as him. So I think Mr. Trump's going to leave that one alone.
What did you make, Dr. Hendricks, of the video? So we've been playing it a little bit. Have you ever seen that before, where a video has been put together highlighting the achievements, the career, the volunteer service, the benefits someone has provided to a community? Have you seen that? Has that
Sorry, sippers, if it's a little low.
I've not seen it before, but obviously we're now living in a
Up,
technical
whatever
age,
you're
and may start something. I'm sure other individuals who have access to footage or B-roll or photos that they may be able to show their goodwill in the communities that they come from across the country, they may be able to establish something like that, like Mr. Combs is doing, to show his human side. And this should be something to illustrate for all individuals that are being incarcerated across this country, that they may be humanized, and that they may have to take responsibility for their actions, but they still can contribute something to society as they move forward. So I think this is a good thing that he's doing to show his human side, even though he's convicted of the two counts that he was. And I believe that this could be a start of something in the future for other individuals who are facing federal and state time.
Sierra, there's a lot of question, a lot of feeling about the emotion there today, right? So there's a poll up that says, how do you think Diddy will react when he hears his fate? 37% say he'll be emotional. 29% say calm and composed.
So the warden says that he feels Diddy's gesture of submitting that production of him in other environments outside of them looking at him in the freak off way and things like that will encourage other convicted people to also do the same, to maybe be looked at in somewhat of a better light despite their charges, convictions, etc. What do you guys think? Drop that in the chat.
20% will say shocked. 14% say defiant. What is the feeling outside that courthouse? What has been the feeling during the course of this trial? There are complicated emotions for people. I think a big part of it was, you know, the Sean Combs that we knew, the Sean Combs that was beloved, the Sean Combs that was renowned. To hear the allegations against him and to hear what he was convicted of was a shock to many people. And it kind of goes into that poll about, does your feeling about him change? Does your view on him change? But there are complicated feelings where people don't believe the victims in this case. There are people who don't believe he should have been convicted. There are people who believe he should have been convicted across the board. What is that feeling that you're seeing from outside the courthouse and as you've been covering this trial?
I think it's hard, right? Because the reason that we all are following this case is because we know the name Sean P. Diddy Combs because he was a celebrity. And that's really what it is. When we know a celebrity, we know them from afar. We idolize them because of their music or movies, etc. And we don't necessarily know what's going on behind closed doors. But now with this trial, with everything seemingly out in the open, it does, to your point in that poll we spoke about earlier, change the course of public opinion in regards to P. Diddy and the allegation and now conviction that he has. So I guess it remains to be seen what sort of reaction Diddy himself, Sean Combs, will have when this sentence is handed down. As for what's going on right here, I've seen a little bit of everything. Earlier throughout this live stream today, I've heard multiple people running up and down the street yelling, "Free Diddy." So there are still supporters here for P. Diddy. Additionally, I just saw a man moments ago who came over live streaming and said, "I've been watching Law and Crime. I'd love you guys." So you know we have people here who are watching our live stream down at the courthouse supporting what we're talking about here. So it's an interesting juxtaposition of emotions here on both sides.
I want to get 2 quick points from both my guests before I have to sign them off. Sierra's going to stay with us, of course. So there's an update here, Dr. Hendricks, from court, Nicole Westmoreland. There is no benefit to warehousing Mr. Combs in prison. Thank you. Judge asked Mr. Steele. Mr. Steele says, Brian Steele, one of his defense attorneys, we wanted his children to come up, then show the video. Judge says, please come forward. My name is Quincy Brown. He's my father. So we're about to hear from Quincy Brown.
Yes,
no benefit to warehousing Mr. Combs in prison?
Well, I mean, of course, the defense is going to say that because, you know, they don't want their client to be behind bars. So, I mean, that, but in terms of him, you know, being held accountable for his actions, and the judge is going to have to make that decision, and that's why they have the high responsibility of being a federal judge, is that they are going to be able to measure all of the information based on the evidence, based on criminal history, based on what he can bring to the table in the community later on in his life, and ultimately that judge is going to have to make that decision. So, but I'm not surprised that his defense attorney said there's no public benefit from it. So I mean, and that's a question for a lot of different individuals who are incarcerated. But ultimately, he's going to have to take responsibility for his actions, and it may include some jail time.
They're moving pretty quickly, Safa, through these statements from family. Quincy Brown says, this is his son, he is transformed. He will not jeopardize his freedom again. As his children, we wish to heal together. Next up, my name is Justin Combs. I ask you, give my father a second chance. My father is my superhero. My father always told me to believe in God. I talk to my father every day, every other hour. Next up, I'm Christian Combs. I'm the one who most resembled my pops, my mannerism. My whole life, I studied my dad up and down. He is the greatest man in the world, my superhero. Is this going to have an impact on the judge's decision, Safa?
I think it's most certainly going to have an impact. And I think that this, in part, is going to be the defense's strongest tactic to get the judge to come in alignment with their sentencing request. Right now, what you see is obviously the children of Mr. Combs who are really delivering heartfelt, heart impacting, and pulling at the judge's heartstrings for leniency for their father. And these are the individuals that truly have firsthand relationships and that will be impacted the most with Mr. Combs' absence. So I think that what they're going to be saying,
I'd like to add to that, Sippers, as far as Christian Combs. We've seen Christian, right, throughout blogs, whatever, however have you. And he does mirror Puffy, right? Now, does it always appear to be in such a good way? I believe Christian Combs also has some civil lawsuits against him for actual allegations of, inappropriateness and things of that nature. Lots of allegations have came out and just, scandal, rumor about Christian Combs and Chris Brown being together, doing things on Diddy's yacht, or I believe Diddy's yacht, where girls are alleging and claiming that they were 8 and things like that. So that's not too much in the, way of trying to persuade the judge to not give Diddy significant amount of time, because Diddy hasn't been the best example for his kids, right? And regardless if his kids were not in the room or not, even though we have been made to believe that Christian may have been at times close to where freak-offs were taking place, allegedly. We know as we were children, right? The walls have ears, right? The streets talk. So more than likely, Diddy's kids knew of how and the ways Diddy, carried out outside of him being a dad. So I'm so excited. I cannot hide it. Okay. We're live October 3rd, 2025. Diddy sentencing. I just happened to, while I was doing one of the parts, I'm on part 26 of the look back on how Diddy got convicted, just check and be like, well, when is he getting sentenced? And it was today. I'm like, okay, let me jump on, sip some tea, spill some tea, right? So we're live. Diddy Talks Teas. Remember, when you come in the room, sit down at the tea table, get your teacup filled up. We are sipping on Diddy's tea for sentencing. What will be his fate? Let's get it.
what his other children continue to say will have a compelling effect on the judge. So compelling that, he'd give him time served or the 14 months essentially. Probably not. But I think that these statements from the children are going to really.
This spread I made is so delicious. So it was stuffed bell pepper casserole. It's essentially stuffed bell pepper just baked in a casserole dish, right? And so I sprinkled some taco seasoning on it and put some taco bean dip and stuff in it, Taco Bell bean dip and extra shredded cheese, and I'm eating it with nachos, and it's delicious. So I'm slapping, right? I'm smacking. Not for nothing. Not everybody, I'm not gonna say everybody. A lot of folk want to see Diddy get a lot of time. Diddy is not in the most favored. How do you think Diddy will fare in the penal system? Because remember, Diddy will now go from the pokey to the big boy pokey, right? And the warden, I've heard on other lives he's done, where he said Diddy will be treated as any other inmate. He will not get special. They say that, but Diddy's a billionaire, right? But he's saying he won't get treated special. He will be, in general population unless otherwise not needed to be, or for safety reasons. But, with the money and influence that Diddy has, it's going to go one or two ways. He's going to be really, really highly favored in prison because he got money and influence, or he's going to get bullied and punked because he got money and influence. So I'm eager to see. We're going to stay tuned and continue to sip in Diddy's tea.
Go in the judge's mind as he considers his sentence.
Safa Robinson Ferrer, Dr. Dwayne Hendricks, thank you both so much for coming on. Really, really appreciate your expert insight and analysis into this as we continue into another hour of the Sean Diddy Combs sentencing. Sierra Gillespie and I will be right back. We have new guests coming on. Again, I said full day affair. We don't know how long this sentencing is going to happen, but we're covering it for you right here on Long Crime. We'll be right back.
So we're going to go back up to the talking points.
Federal sex crimes. That in and of itself is an unprecedented headline. It is the unknown of today. What do I mean by that? We have no idea what the actual sentence will be. There is no pro forma mandatory sentence here. The defense is asking for no more than 14 months in prison. He's already served 13 months in the Metropolitan Detention Center. So if the judge sides with them, he's going to be out in no time, if that's the case. The prosecution is asking for 11 years. The probation department, which prepared a report in anticipation of this sentence, they are recommending 7 years, 3 months. So there is a range here. And this is all up to the judge, Judge Arun Subramanian. It is his discretion following the guidelines. There is a lot of room here. By the way, we also don't know how long this whole hearing will last. There's a talk that it might last 4 hours or 5 hours. We're not entirely sure. We believe that Sean Combs will make a statement. We believe his attorneys will make a series of statements. Prosecutors will make statements. We believe his attorneys will make a series of statements. Prosecutors will make statements. We believe that they may even read letters into the record. We believe victim Mia, who testified at trial, will make a statement. This was allowed by the judge over the objection of the defense. And just to highlight another point, this all comes after numerous people, family, inmates, those who testified at trial, victims. Combs himself wrote letters to the judge to try to persuade him one way or another about what this sentence should be. By the way, the defense is even trying to get in a video compilation, a montage of Sean Combs. Actually, we're going to play you bits of that in the background as we talk. It seems to be very consistent with what Sean Combs said in his letter, which we'll read as well. The idea being that he has done good in this world. Think about his family, that he could be more of a benefit to society on the outside than on the inside. But then you couple that with all of the letters from the people who were affected by Sean Combs and his crimes, talking about that he should not get any kind of leniency. So there is a lot of unpredictability here, a lot at stake. We're going to cover it all. I'm not going to do it by myself. So we have Elizabeth Milner, who is inside that courtroom as this hearing goes forward. She'll be on with us later on. We're actually going to do a special episode of Sidebar. We'll talk about everything that happened in that courtroom. But we also have with us Sierra Gillespie, who is on the ground outside of that federal courthouse. And we also have with us trial attorney Aaliyah Roberts and civil rights attorney Joe Richardson. Thank you so much. This is part one of what could be my all-day panel. This could be an all-day event. I'm going to start with Sierra Gillespie, who is outside. Sierra, thank you so much for coming here, for reporting about what's been happening. Let's first talk about the scene. What is the scene like outside that courthouse? And have you noticed anybody of note about who has come there? I saw reports that the Punisher, who was one of these sex workers that had testified at this trial, has appeared outside that courthouse. Who have you seen? What is the scene like?
Good morning, Jesse. The scene here today is shockingly calm, especially when we're talking about the fate of Sean P. Diddy Combs. I mean, is he going to walk free today? Is he going to be behind bars for more than a decade? Who's to say at this point? And so I guess I am kind of shocked that it's not as rowdy. I mean, last time I talked to you, the day the verdict came down, there was baby oil, there was lube, all outside of this courthouse behind me here in the Southern District of Manhattan. So far today, I haven't seen anything like that, but I have seen a pretty big crowd. We've heard a little bit of cheering, but overall, it's been pretty quiet. Now, we do know that Diddy's mother, Janice Combs, has walked in. We know that the family usually comes in, a pretty big Sprinter van. We like to capture that and see them walking in because we do know his family has been very supportive throughout all of this. There are reports, as you said, that the Punisher, who I believe we have actually talked to, you talked to on Sidebar and then here on our previous live streams, was outside here today too. I'm not sure who else we're going to see, but I mean, we've got our eyes and ears right here at the courthouse to see what's going to happen.
So we're already getting questions in from Carter. Jesse's got his suit on. It's official. It is official. You didn't even need my suit on to let you know that this is official. But yes, I do have the suit on. Question from Picture This and That LLC. Did you really incorporate that? Picture This and That LLC. It's a good name. All right. Where's Elizabeth? Elizabeth is inside that courthouse like she has been throughout the course of this entire trial. Queen Elizabeth. She will be out later to talk to us about what she's seeing, what she's hearing. This is a very pivotal day. Before we go to more questions, Sierra, I was right about the guidelines, right? Like, talk to us about what we should be anticipating in terms of a range of a sentence here.
I think this is really interesting, Jesse, because if we go for the maximum here, it could be 20 years, right? Because we have 2 convictions. That's a max of 10 years per conviction, so 20 total. However, I don't think that's really what we're going to end up seeing. The prosecution is asking for around 11 years, a little bit more than that. And then, of course, the defense says we want 14 months, which, if you do the math, shockingly, Diddy has still been behind bars since his arrest in September of 2024. So we're at about 13 months right now. That would add an additional month about, so almost time served. And the guidelines are, showing we could have the 20 years. The recommendation seems to be between 5 to 7. So we have a huge range here of what it could be. I mean, anything's on the table really today, but again, it's up to Judge Arun Subramanian what's really going to happen. So that's why we got to pay such close attention to everything that comes out today.
And every detail. So we are getting reporting that Combs' lawyer, Mark Agnifilo, Brian Steele, they're talking next to the lectern in that courtroom. Alexandra Shapiro is standing with Nicole Westmoreland, another one of Sean Combs' defense attorneys. The prosecutors are seated at the front table. Maureen Comey, who was the lead prosecutor in this case, as we know, she has left the prosecutor's office. She is not there. Obviously, she's not a part of this prosecution anymore. We have this question coming in, Sierra, from Clarissa Schmidt. How long will the sentencing actually take? It's got to be quick, right? Not necessarily. Based on what I said, I mean, this could take hours.
Oh, yeah, I think it could take hours. We have to go through, both sides are going to want to present. We know that P. Diddy himself is likely going to speak. We don't know how long it's going to take, or as far as any of the victim impact statements, it could take hours. I mean, I have heard rumblings that it could be 3 to 5 hours. However, there were some rumors. I was talking to Elizabeth Milner this morning before she went into the courthouse that some rumors say this could even trickle into Monday. Now, I think that might be kind of unprecedented. That's a rumor. Nothing concrete at all, but we could be here literally all day, and we have that prepared. We are going to be here until we have, the sentence handed down.
So, by the way, we put up a poll. We're going to put up polls as well. Did you guys miss our live stream coverage? Big time, 61% say big time, missed it. 21% say sorta, and then I'm here for Elizabeth, 18%. That's amazing. So, Sierra, we're gonna just stand by. We have more updates that are coming in. I want to bring on Aaliyah and Joe on this. So, Aaliyah, it's great to have you both here. Aaliyah, we have this question that just came in from Beauty Slay. Can they try him again for the counts that are not guilty? So, right, racketeering and the 2 counts of sex trafficking. Can they try him on the counts that are not guilty, or does jeopardy prevent it from happening? Aaliyah, I'll start with you.
No, hi, Jesse. Good morning. Thank you for having me. And no, he cannot be tried again. He was tried, he was convicted, therefore his conviction stands. He cannot be tried for the same crimes again.
Okay, Joe, I got to ask you about this letter from Sean Combs. And by the way, as I read parts of this, if you want, you can put up this potential montage video that will be, again, potentially played in court, because it kind of echoes very similar to the themes in his letter to the judge, where he basically said, I hope this letter finds you well and in good health and spirits. Again, this is the Judge Subramanian. Thank you for the opportunity to express my thoughts to you. First and foremost, I want to apologize and say how sincerely I am for all the hurt and pain that I've caused others by my conduct. I take full responsibility and accountability for my past wrongs. This has been the hardest 2 years of my life, and I have no one to blame for my current reality and situation but myself. He goes on to say, that I'm sorry can only be so much, talks about what he went through over the past 13 months. And then he really gets into putting the blame on himself. I lost my way. I got lost in my journey, lost in the drugs and the excess. My downfall was rooted in my selfishness. I've been humbled and broken to my core. He talks about how difficult the circumstances of his incarceration at the MDC are. Says it's not to evoke sympathy, but what he really tries to focus in on the work that he's been doing behind bars. And there's a part of this letter, Joe, where he's talking, and it seems, about the benefit he could be to society on the outside as opposed to inside. He says, I can't change the past, but I can change the future. I know that God put me here to transform me. Since incarceration, I've gone through a spiritual reset. I'm on a journey that will take time and hard work. I'm proud to say I'm working harder than I have ever before. He goes on to say, today I humbly ask you for another chance. This could be what he says in open court today, and we believe he's actually going to be allowed to wear civilian clothes as he does this. By the way, this is images of when he did the marathon back in the day. I have two questions for you, Joe. A, how much of an impact will Sean Combs' statements, this letter, have on the judge? And B, if this letter and if this video is allowed in, I have to wonder, is the judge going to look at all that and say, yeah, all the good that you did, all this time with your family was at the same time you were committing crimes? And I'm curious, again, the overall impact of the letter and the video.
Yeah, I mean, of course, he's going to fall on the sword. That's what he's going to do. I think the letter, to my mind, has a better chance of making an impact because there's no presentation, and you have to figure out whether or not you really want to believe it. But it's not going to be a shiny video. He was great at making videos. He was great at presenting. He's always been good at that. And to your point, while he was doing all the good in the past that he was doing, he was beating the heck out of these women and doing some things that really he doesn't want to remind the judge of, right? So I think he's got to be careful about the whole video thing because there's no jury here today. I always thought that the jury could help him because they wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt and that he's the guy that they've seen all of these years, over the years. But the judge is not that guy. And so it's a very slippery slope to keep from coming off as too shiny and too, fill in the blank in light of everything he actually has done and in light of everything that he was doing while he was doing all this good. He's got to focus more on the good he can do in the future, not even the good that he did in the past, because while he was doing good in the past, these women were going through a private hell. So we'll see how much of an impact it actually has. My sense is the letter and his words, if he says something to the judge, has a better chance of making an impact, piercing through and hopefully coming off as sincere. The film, the slideshow, whatever it is a presentation. Whether it's heartfelt or not, there's still this veil of presentation that he's got to get around. And we all know he can present. He's always been able to do that. So in and of itself, that's not going to carry the day.
Aaliyah, we have this question from Sydney Sexton. Been watching since day one of the trial. Thank you for the coverage. Thank you so much for saying that. A question, what are your predictions on the length of sentencing? Aaliyah, obviously I'll give you the floor to answer that, but I guess the other question is, and I focus on something I mentioned before, the reason this sentencing is so significant is because of the unknown. This is not a murder case where the judge listens to victim impact statements and already has to go in and says it's going to be life without the possibility of parole. This is a case where I do wonder how much is the judge going to be persuaded by all of the letters, all of the statements? Do you think he's already made up his mind? And what do you think that sentence could be?
It's a great question, Jesse. I think that I'm thinking somewhere in the range of 5 to 7 years. The reason I think that is because I feel like that, for lack of a better term, it splits the baby. Right? So the prosecution wants 11 years. The defense wants 14 months. So 5 to 7 years will definitely split the baby, for lack of a better term, in that it shows that it's not simply you did your time and you're done.
Yeah. I think that's a good
if Diddy gets 5 to 7 years, he's going to have a baby, okay? Diddy's been crying about getting out of jail. He's thrown everything out the judge that he can. Want to get out of jail. It hasn't happened. I mean, New York's a rich state, right? So if he would have been like Mississippi somewhere, he was like $5 million or whatever he was trying to give to, make bail. I think it was 500,000 million or something like that. A lot of money, right? Especially to a poor place, right? They probably would have let Diddy out and said to hell what you thought she was talking about. But New York is like, no, we are the richest state, in the United States. We're not letting you out. And there's no amount of money that you can give us to convince us to let you out. So Diddy is going to have a baby if he gets 5 to 7 years. He's going to have a baby, okay? Drop your teacups in the chat. Let me know where you are at with Diddy being sentenced today, okay? And where are all the sippers? But not for nothing, the video is up and will be here for eternity. So whenever you want to come in and sip this tea, you are always welcome. New sippers, become a sipper at the subscribe button, okay? Click those notifications. Let us know that you want to sip tea with us whenever we go live, because the tea is always sweet with Tanisha. Let's get it. Diddy's sentencing day. Oh.
We got again, very similar to what I just asked. This is a question from Monica Price. Has the judge already decided, or can he literally decide in court? Your opinion about that? Some people have looked at what Judge Subramanian has done in the past, denying him bail, denying him the motion to throw out the convictions. They say, oh, that means he's really going to go heavy. So maybe he'll go 11 years. Who knows? You persuaded by that? What's your prediction?
Well, I'm sure the judge has some thoughts, right? Because it's his job to have some thoughts, but he's supposed to be moved by what happens today, right?
Okay. Say you're a career criminal, right? Diddy is suspected to be, however, never being brought up on any charges per se, really. Always getting off, the shooting at the nightclub, and he walked away. Shine took the 10 years. Supposedly Diddy was the one that shot the girl, right? So never really doing a long stint in jail. This is the longest Diddy's been in jail, I believe, ever in his life. So he's already in there shitting a brick right now, having a baby, right? He's about to have his baby, okay? And so Diddy is not going to fare well. If Diddy gets 10 years, that's a person, okay, like I was saying, people that have done, a long stint in their life, over their lifetime, however, or whatever have you, are, less likely to cry about 10 years. They're like, I can do 10 years. I've done 20. However, Diddy's not done any significant amount of time until now. Okay. And he's crying, begging, and pleading to be let out of jail now. Right. So that's not going to be good for Diddy at all. If Diddy gets a long stint of time, he's going to lose whatever rest of his mind he has. I can definitely, see that happening. Chime in, drop it in the chat. Let us know how you feel about Diddy potentially surviving more than, I give him more. If Diddy gets more than 5 years, I don't see him mentally surviving that. Not coming from never being in jail to now Diddy's a middle-aged man coming from wealth, power, influence, and a lot of money. Okay, I just don't see Diddy being able to survive that mentally.
He's supposed to have an open mind in terms of where things go. He doesn't seem like a, quote, soft judge. He didn't let him stay on the street, didn't bail him out despite 3 or 4 requests. So it's going to be interesting to see where he lands. And I think an important question, a related question, what we're asking is, how far is he going to deviate from the guidelines? Because what Ali is talking about is really something that's close to what the guidelines would be, right? So what is it about P. Diddy that perhaps makes him veer much below the guidelines are veer much above the guidelines, right? And so the question is, how far away is he going to go from that? I think that because it's a circus potentially, because there will be presentations today and a longer presentation and such a potential divergence in what he could really receive, the judge really would have to have an open mind going in today because he really doesn't know what he's going to see, and it's a little bit unusual. So my sense is he hasn't decided yet, hopefully, right? And hopefully he considers, and in his rendering, he talks about what he considered, including and particularly what he saw today.
Sierra, so first of all, we're getting an update from court. Want to let everybody know we're going to have updates from court. We're going to read them to you in real time. There's no cameras allowed, but we'll let you know what's happening. Sean Combs has been brought in. He's wearing a white shirt, so he's not wearing his MDC clothes. He puts his papers under the table. He's been leaning back. He blows a kiss to the gallery. His mother, Brian Steele, is standing next to him, whispering in his ear. So we're about to start this sentencing hearing right now. Sierra, there have been a flurry of letters. There has been a flurry of communication to the court in anticipation of this sentencing. What are some of the notable letters that the judge has received in anticipation of this?
He's received multiple different letters in all of this. And I guess it makes sense, right? Because both sides want a win here. We didn't see a complete sweep in terms of conviction. We heard all of the drama there. Overall, a win for Diddy. So the prosecution wants as much time as they can get, right? So they're going to bring forth letters talking about that. But counter, the defense on the same side of things, they want as little time as they can get for P. Diddy. So of course we've noticed that Diddy himself has prepared a statement, that he likely will read it if that is allowed. Then of course we have the information about other victim impact statements, talking about Cassie, Mia. There's been some back and forth here that the defense says we don't want Mia to speak. This has nothing to do with her. His conviction has nothing to do with Mia. Why are we even bringing that up? So that's one of the other additional letters. There's also information from Gina. If we're going back to the trial and talking about this is victim number 3, who, if you guys remember, go back in your memory bank. Initially, victim 3 was going to be Gina, going to testify for the government. Then in the final hour, the government said, we don't know where she's at. We don't have her. So suddenly there were only 3 victims rather than the 4. And since all of this has come out, Gina has said, I felt that I was, pressured by the prosecution to come forward and say that I was a victim when I wasn't really. So the defense now has this in their back pocket, a letter of support for P. Diddy. So we've got multiple letters, support against some of the victims, the allegations. All of it is kind of culminating today with sentencing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And Aaliyah, it was kind of shocking, right? Gina comes out and says I was pressured by the prosecution, but I wonder if the judge will look at that. And by the way, this is not me saying which way the judge should go. I'm just wondering, kind of surmise the judge may say. Could the judge look at Gina's letter and say, she really wasn't part of the case that the jurors found him guilty of? Like, what Gina says doesn't affect the fact that he was found guilty of transportation to engage in prostitution. I'm looking at those crimes that he was convicted of. Or can the judge say, you know what, it does tell me a little bit of something?
I think it could go both ways, honestly. It really just depends on the judge. I think that the fact that this witness specifically keeps saying that, well, the prosecution made me feel like a victim versus actually being a victim, and then potentially writing a letter in support. I mean, to the extent that the judge considers her letter, right, it would be to give the same weight as other people who are in support of Diddy, right? I mean, Young Miami's name was mentioned many times throughout this trial, or at least in the coming up to the trial, and she wrote a letter in support as well, right? So I imagine the judge would give the same amount of weight as he would give to her letter.
Okay, so we have an update from court. All rise. This has begun. Clerk, this is U.S. versus Sean Combs. Judge Subramanian says, do we have the signed order of forfeiture? Prosecutor Slavic says, yes, I am handing it up. Judge, first I'll go over that. I have received, and the pre-sentencing reports, I'll hear from the parties. So we're getting underway right now. We have a poll up. Do you think Diddy will walk out a free man today? 58% say no. 23% say yes. 19% say hard to. So Fabiola Delgado LeBron says, Joe, I took your advice on the glasses. Mine haven't been clearer. There you go. There we go. Glasses became a big part of our conversation as we were talking about this. Yeah. Okay. Do you feel there is a possibility that Diddy will be able to walk away today due to time served? Even if he gets time served, like he just walks out of the courtroom like it's Law and Order. He actually has to be processed, right?
Yeah, he does. I mean, he wouldn't walk out that very moment. But the question would be, could he get a time served situation where technically all he would have to do is process to come out? And although it's possible, I don't think it's probable. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think he's going to get out today. I think he's going to get some amount of time, more than what the defense is asking for. Clearly, the defense, of course, is going to ask low. Prosecution is going to ask high. The judge is going to wind up somewhere between the two. There's a question as to which one he'll wind up closer to, right? Could he wind up in that 4 to 6, 5 to 7 range? That would be the sentencing guidelines. Or is this a situation where, because of how unusual it is, because of the magnitude of who Sean P. Diddy Combs is, he winds up lower or higher? I mean, those things can cut both ways. But even if he were to get free, as it were, he would still have to process out. So he wouldn't walk out that very moment, with Diddy music playing in the background. I mean, it would completely undermine, by the way, this whole idea of being somber, of being sorry, of being regretted, things like that. I think he'd have to be concerned about that as well. Even if he does get out, he would need to be somber and need to be humble, because otherwise he becomes this person that he was before. And this becomes a thing that makes everybody go, the people particularly that fear for their safety, et cetera, that were sympathetic to Cassie and others, oh, here we go again.
That's a good point. We have an update from court. Judge says, I've received the defense's reply memo of October 2nd and the letter from Mr. Combs and the video, which we're showing you right now, and the video the defense plans to play here in court. I appreciated the letters. I've received the government's letters from Miss Ventura and others, meaning, the victims in this case. I appreciate them. Now, Aaliyah, I don't know what to take away from when he says, I appreciate them. Does it signify that he's thinking about them? Does it signify that he's going to use it in his calculus, his determination, his analysis? Or he just says, hey, listen, I appreciate them submitting them?
I think the judge is very particular in the words that he used. I think by saying I appreciate them, he's acknowledging that he's received them, that he's reviewed them, and that he is going to take those letters into consideration. I think I appreciate is a better word than I've reviewed, acknowledged, and understand. It's a very short way of saying, hey, I got them. Hey, I'm looking into them. Hey, I'm gonna consider them when making my decision, but I'm not gonna say I'm considering them while making my decision.
We have an update for you, okay? Sierra, I'm going to throw this to you. So, Sean Combs' defense attorney says we're going to submit a course evaluation from MDC, where he's been housed. Prosecutor Slavic says we don't have a copy. The judge says, please give her one. Put that to the side. Prosecutor Slavic just announced Mia no longer wishes to address the court here today, in part due to the letter submitted by the defense bullying. Sierra, that is a big update, that Mia apparently will no longer make a statement in court, because we know the defense was trying to object to her testimony, object to her statement. The prosecution did accuse them of bullying her and, characterizing her in a certain way. We can talk back and forth about her testimony during the course of this trial, whether or not it helped or hurt the prosecution. But the fact that she is apparently no longer going to make a statement in court, apparently because of what the defense said in their letter, your reaction to that?
I mean, this isn't the first time that we've heard this sort of argument from the prosecution, right? If we go back to the trial, they were saying how important it was for these women, these survivors, to come forward, not just for this case, but for any sort of case across the entire country when we're talking about sexual assault allegations. And essentially what they said is they have seen bullying, they have seen coercion, they have seen threats, all from Diddy and his team. And again, these were allegations, but basically the prosecutors say, from the start, you guys have been bullying all of these survivors into not coming forward. That's what happened with Gina. Now, of course, we do know what Gina says now. She says that it was prosecutors actually conversely, who are the ones who are kind of making her feel as though she was a victim. But here, this allegation that Mia has been bullied by the defense, I mean, I guess we should pay attention to it and put some sort of weight into it, because if Mia truly does feel that her safety is at risk here, that's very important to consider, because she does have the right to be able to speak, and it's very important that she would be heard. But I mean, I'm very interested to see what the defense has to say about all of this, because I assume they're going to say, hey, there was no bullying here. We did none of that. We were well within our rights. So I think that's important too.
Yeah, remember, Mia testified that she was sexually assaulted by Sean Combs multiple times. In her letter to the judge, she said that the sentence should reflect the years of coercion, financial abuse, humiliation, physical and sexual violence, and the profound trauma that he has inflicted as a result. It doesn't take away that that letter was submitted. So the judge could still consider the letter. It's just the fact that she's not going to appear in court, I think, is also quite significant. We have an update from court. Prosecutor Slavic says, we think the defense's letter violated Your Honor's rules, again, regarding how they fought back against Mia. Judge says, I thought the tone was inappropriate and it should not happen again. Anyone beyond Mr. Combs? Brian Steele, one of Sean Combs' defense attorneys, says the Reverend and Mr. Combs' children will come up and stand together. So it appears we're going to hear multiple people during the course of this hearing. Very interesting. So Stilo Suave, have any of the letters in Combs' trial been made public yet? Yes, you can see all of them. They're all out there. I was reading the one from Sean Combs as well. Aaliyah, question from Words 789. Why is P. Diddy allowed to wear civilian clothing when he's already been convicted and is in custody?
It's really just about presentation. You want the judge to consider this individual, Mr. Combs, in this case, as a person and not as a criminal, right? Even though he has been convicted, even though the sentencing is still being considered, you don't want to be sentencing someone in jail clothes. It kind of it taints the image that the defense is trying to put forth, that even though I was convicted, even though I did do these wrongs, I'm still a father, I'm still, a person of the community that wants to support the community, and I want to be looked at and considered as such.
Going back to questions as we wait for more updates. So just submit your questions on YouTube. We'll make sure to answer them here on air. Okay, this is from Dungaroo TV. It's a good question. Joe, are there any precedents that could give us an idea of how long Combs' sentencing will be? I mean, that was battled back and forth by the prosecution and the defense in their memos, their sentencing recommendations, looking at past cases. I think it is interesting and notable to talk about the fact that he was only convicted of these crimes as opposed to these crimes in connection to an overarching racketeering conspiracy case or a sex trafficking case. There was the question about whether or not he would even be brought up on those charges, the transportation to engage in prostitution charges, what he was convicted of, if those were the only charges, if they weren't connected. But he was acquitted of the most serious charges. So when we're talking about precedent here, purely on these prostitution charges, is there precedent on what the range could or could not be?
Yeah, there's precedent on the charges themselves, but there's not precedent on this particular individual, who he is, how this happened. They made a very interesting argument. It was unsuccessful about saying, hey, he was just a guy that just liked to watch things happen. He should never have been convicted on even the things that he was convicted on. So if it was just about the precedent, someone is convicted for this crime, if that was the case, the sentencing guidelines are 5 to 7 right in there, and the parties wouldn't be deviating from them too much, right? But that's what's so amazing about this. What's being asked for is so divergent. I think it suggests that either there's no precedent at all, or there's distinguishing elements that say you should deviate very high or very low from what the charges themselves would normally warrant under this circumstance. So there is precedent, but there isn't. I hate to talk out of two sides of my mouth here because I feel like I am, but Diddy changes everything. He makes things look different potentially. And he makes for an argument. He can say all these things that I can do in the community. The other side, the prosecutor can say all the damage he'd done because of all of the things that were brought before the court, even though he wasn't convicted of those things. There's been a whole lot of discussion from Mia to Gina about people, acquitted conduct being considered and all of these other things. So he really changes the calculus on what would normally be a precedent based on the actual crimes themselves? That's a clear question. The more complicated question is, how does Diddy change the potential precedent or get rid of it altogether?
Some updates in courts. They're going back and forth about who will be allowed to speak, in the sense that the judge says, look, I overruled the defense wanting to exclude Mia, so what about who the defense wants to call in? It seems like the judge is going to allow the children and a Dr. Johnson, this Reverend doctor, to speak as well. He's going to be thinking about the others. Okay, got a super chat question. Thank you so much. Super chat question from Free. I'll go to you, Aaliyah. This is from Free. Does Diddy get to go last with the video and the letter? So will he make the last statement and provide his letter or his statement, as well as this video that we've been playing in the background?
As we've been speaking before, I'm not sure that the video actually comes in as far as the sentencing is concerned. I think the judge saying that he received it and reviewed it is probably as much as we're going to receive regarding the video in the sentencing hearing today. I also think that it depends on the judge and his preference and what he wants to hear. Is it normal or customary for the defendant to have his statement last? Sometimes, but the judge might want to hear from the victims last. It really just depends on how this judge wants to run his courtroom.
This is such an interesting update that we just got in. The judge is talking about what he can and cannot consider. This became a big topic post-verdict and going into sentencing. As to the objections, the defense says acquitted conduct cannot be considered, meaning regarding all the conduct that supported the racketeering conspiracy case and the sex trafficking charges. There is no guidance from any court on this, the judge says. We don't know what the jury was thinking, but it's about overlapping conduct, and it only impacts the advisory guidelines range. That's a good question here, right, Joe? What can the judge consider here? Can the judge consider the beating of Cassie Ventura in that 2016 tape? Did it really support the jury's findings with respect to transportation to engage in prostitution? You asked me, it seemed that it was more about, was that sex trafficking? You know, the transportation to engage in prostitution felt, was Sean Combs transporting sex workers and these victims for the purposes of sex work? If there was a money trail, voice notes, text messages, you could prove that case without even the 2016 video. But should it be considered for purposes of sentencing?
Yeah, I mean, that's what's really, really interesting here, because I believe there's overlap between the crimes that they were trying to convict him of. So even though you're not supposed to have acquitted conduct considered, if you're considering Mia's statement, if you're considering certain things that really went towards the other crimes for which he was acquitted, how is it not arguably acquitted conduct? It's things that would go to both transportation as well as the criminal conspiracy, which he was ultimately acquitted of. How is it not crossing the line and being in that gray area there? So he's not supposed to consider acquitted conduct, but I think that there's such potential for overlap here. The judge is going to have to be really careful about what he actually does consider, what comes in, et cetera, in that regard. And I think that there's argument back and forth. I mean, that's why there was objections about certain people's information and letters coming in, because there's a question as to whether or not this is about the acquitted conduct for which he was not convicted. And so it's an open question. Certain things aren't supposed to get in, but there's so much crossover and overlap. I think there's gray area, and I think it could be muddy.
Sierra, we got a question from Dungaroo TV. What do you think the repercussions will be for Sean Combs after all of this blows over? I guess the question would be, putting aside the sentence, let's say he's released, you know, let's say he gets 14 months and he's released, or let's say he gets 2 years, he's released. He comes out. What are the repercussions for him? Because he could still lead a life. He still has a career. He still has businesses. He's got over 60 lawsuits he's got to contend with. But what are the repercussions in your mind after covering Sean Combs for such a long time?
I think that this is such a good question, right? It's really why all of us are interested in the case in the first place, because to see the downfall of someone like P. Diddy, who prior to his arrest was literally receiving the key to New York City, where we are right now, and now he's behind me in federal court. I mean, it's a major fall from grace, and that begs the question, what's going to happen? I mean, he's already been in jail for more than a year at this point. Whatever happens with sentencing will happen. He'll serve his time, he'll get released, whatever. But I think the big question here is what's next for his career. I mean, we know that P. Diddy is undoubtedly very charming. He, charmed the masses with his huge music career. On top of that, we're talking about some of the brands that he had in regards to alcohol. Then there was his clothing line. And since all of these allegations came forward and some of the civil lawsuits, he has seen a bit of issues as far as the business side of things. So I guess that's really the question. Will he be canceled from all of this? Will his career be completely gone? Honestly, I don't think so, because just being down here at the courthouse, there are still supporters for Diddy. There are still people who say, yeah, Diddy is a father figure. People will make up their minds and say, I'm done listening to it. I don't want to hear anything he puts out. I'm never going to buy another Sean John item ever again. But then some people who are the diehard fans will help continue to perpetuate the future of his career. I think it's kind of a wait and see situation.
It's a good point. So again, the judge is considering whether or not acquitted conduct could be considered for purposes of sentencing. Judge said acquitted conduct can be considered. He cites a Second Circuit case and other cases. Even matters that cannot be considered for the guidelines can be considered under a specific legal statute. Now, the U.S.'s objections, they argue for the criminal sexual abuse guideline. We'll learn a little bit more about this. Aaliyah, how does he tackle all of the civil lawsuits that he's facing?
Well, he has a reverend in the courtroom. Maybe he should pray about it, because that's probably the only way he's going to get away with all these civil lawsuits. As we know, in civil court, the burden is significantly less than in criminal court. In criminal court, you have to prove that the prosecution has to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. In civil court, that is not the same. It's a significantly lower standard. And I think the evidence that has been proffered and has been presented in criminal court will undoubtedly be the foundation and the support for these civil lawsuits going forward. I think that he should call his reverend and call his accountant, and that's all I've got for that, because he's going to be fighting these for a very long time.
Look, he's trying to battle it each case at a time, or several cases at a time, basically, motions to dismiss, or saying, how can we fight against people suing him anonymously? If you can convince a court that they shouldn't proceed anonymously under a pseudonym, those people may decide, hey, you know what, I don't want to make myself public. I don't want to go further with the case. That may end it. So it's a tricky battle, and it's a lot of cases. Question, Joe, from Dropping the T. What's everyone's thoughts on what he may get? So I haven't even given my perspective here, but I'll just tell you, Joe, I'm curious your thoughts. I don't think he's getting 20 years. Okay, I don't think the judge is going to go well past. But I also have to say, something that really needs to be considered here is the fact that he did this multiple times. I think that's a key point, that it wasn't a one-off. It was a pattern of doing this with sex workers, payment. It became a system. And I think whether the judge considers the use of violence or considers the use of drugs, it's how many times he did that, which makes it aggravated, and why we may see something closer to maybe 5 to maybe even 7 to 10 years. I mean, is that totally outside the realm of possibility, Joe?
I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility at all. Diddy was a tyrant, man. He did some things he shouldn't have done. He done them over and over again. I've said to you a million times, I'm still trying to figure out how he didn't get convicted 20 years ago with the Shine situation. Back then he goes through what he goes through. He does a religious album, and I've learned my lesson and all. We've been through all this before. I already know what all of this is like. So there's a possibility that the judge is a little less sympathetic because of what happened and how habitually it happened. And we all kind of know that the fact that he had the resources between that and the prosecution really overshooting this thing is really how he kind of escaped. Regular you or me probably wouldn't have gotten off from these things. Okay. And so, literally, the judge can see there is a path. I can see a path where the judge could be pretty hard on, because not only was he convicted of 2 crimes instead of 1, but there was, to your point, this redundant, repetitive thing. He acted lawlessly. And does he really learn his lesson if he walks out before Christmas this year? This becomes this soap opera telenovela story with this happy ending. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Cassie and everybody else are scared to death. Their lives are ruined, destroyed. They've had to completely rebuild. There's something that might be unfair about that in the eyes of the judge. And so therefore, he could deviate up from the guidelines. We'll see what happens, but I certainly see a path for it.
There is some more updates from the court. Judge says there's little precedent on what type of threat is required, but bodily harm makes the most sense. Concrete harms. To force Jane and Miss Ventura to engage in sex acts, does this conduct establish the convicted conduct? There was the flight from Cannes. Judge says, did that meet the requirement of bodily harm threat? There was evidence of that in the case with respect to the hotel nights and freak-offs, but in light of the constitutional questions raised, the court declines to apply the cross-references. Since I can consider it, it does impact the sentence. Next, Mr. Combs' marking of pads as legal. That was troubling, but the intention is not clear. The government should have pushed to clarify it, so I will not apply the enhancement. It's a lot of back and forth about what the judge considered here regarding the sentencing. I think the legal pads were with respect to what was found, I think, in his jail cell. But it does go to a larger question here. Sierra, as someone who covered this case and covered this trial, there are those who will say this is a victimless crime. Transporting sex workers for sex work? Who was harmed as a result of this? I think the judge is kind of talking about that in a way.
This is really tricky, right? Because all the things we've been talking about so far on the live stream, the allegations that we had as far as, racketeering conspiracy, all of that was, he was acquitted on those counts. But we still have all of that kind of in the back of our mind with the testimony from some of those victims, when we're talking about Cassie, Mia, Jane. I don't want to come out and say that this is a completely victimless crime. However, I do feel like that's what the defense is saying in all of this. He's done his time. Let's give him 14 months, so he only has about a month left here at this point. That's their argument here. But then when you take a look at all of the victim impact statements, we heard the drama today about Mia, but of course we have Cassie Ventura. When you take a look at those things, it's really hard to ignore that it does seem that there were victims in this case. That is what they were even called as far as, the court transcripts, victim 1, victim 2, victim 4, all of those things. And so I don't know, it's very muddy. And I think that's why we have this sentencing hearing today, so that we can hear from both sides, because that's really what it's all about, right? Hearing from both sides about their arguments here. We ultimately do have a conviction here. There has to be some sort of sentence. I don't know that I can say it was victimless. I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Well, it's interesting. We just got this update from the court. The judge says the government objects to the probation department not considering Jane and Miss Ventura as vulnerable victims. I overrule this. Made Combs' coercion effective was their condition. Anyway, the court would reach the same conclusion. Now, Mr. Combs' objections. Okay, Aaliyah, that's interesting, right? So first of all, as I mentioned before, the probation department recommended 7 years. It seems, if I'm reading this correctly, I like to think that I am, if I'm reading this correctly, it seems the judge is characterizing the victims in this case in a certain way. And that could be a sign of where the judge may be going with this sentence.
I think so as well. I think just from the court of public opinion, a lot of people deemed Cassie to not be a victim because she received a check, right? That was a lot of the testimony. That was a lot of the cross, rather, when we were in the trial. Oh, Cassie's fine. Cassie received $20 million. This other individual, Jane Doe, she's fine. She's receiving benefits travel and lavish and luxury. So in that sense, it kind of feels like the judge is like, well, yeah, they're victims, but kind of, but not really. But if he keeps this same idea in mind, I'm expecting to get a sentence even less than 5 years. It kind of seems that the judge is like, well, yes, there's a conviction.
Get transferred from MDC. Per the First Step Act, they want to send you to a prison within 500 miles of your release address. I presume it would be a low security prison. If in California, most likely Lompoc or Terminal Island here in San Pedro. If it's the short sentence his legal team is asking for, probably 3 years or less, with good time, together with what he served, he may say, I'd just like to finish the rest of my sentence here.
Yep, very consistent with what Dr. Hendricks was saying. I think we're working on getting Sierra Gillespie up. As we do, I just want to go now, Rich, to Bravado Agency. This question, the super chat question, Rich. Judge Subramanian, clerk for Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She embraced her judicial role with the solemn responsibility of following the law. How might this influence affect Judge Subramanian today?
Action, although she was, of course, one of the significant Supreme Court justices of our lifetime and a great place to clerk. Judge Subramanian, I think, has been trying to act within the scope of the law throughout these proceedings. I think he wants to follow the law, and obviously no judge wants to get reversed, so they always try to follow the law. So I do believe he's going to do his best to consistently adhere to the legal principles and guidelines. That said, at the end of the day, he has some discretion in sentencing. That's what sentencing is all about. That's why even the proposed, the PSR is in a range, and he can go outside of that range, acting consistently with the law. So he will try his best, and we will see what he comes up with.
Well, I'm here with Sierra Gillespie as well. Raises an interesting question. We got this question here from Luna Wolf WY. Do you think, Sierra, do you think people will protest and or riot if he gets the max time? So I guess they're referring to, what, 20 years in prison, which seems unlikely. You're outside that courthouse. You're looking at the scene. I hope for your sake and everyone's sake that doesn't happen, but what do you think?
I don't necessarily think that there's going to be a 20-year sentence here today. I mean, I think that seems pretty extreme. We could maybe rule that out. However, I could see if there is a lengthy sentence that the people here, just based on the vibe, could do something. I mean, last time I was here when the verdicts came down, I know I keep talking about this, but it was very notable that people were squirting baby oil and lube at the courthouse here, the federal courthouse in the Southern District of New York. I mean, it's New York. Anything can happen here. There have been people up and down the streets yelling, "Free Diddy." There have been people running behind me in my live shots and pointing at the monitor saying, "That's just," you know, people do not mind coming up to us.
Armand Wiggins was one of the guys that was outside. Everybody made like a spectacle of it. Armand.
Thanks for watching. Remember to show your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing. It's a blessing. Keep your teacups filled and ready for my next upload. Until then, stay inspired and remember, always stay dipping.